Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're speaking to a director. Among her credits are Down to the Bone, Winter's Bone, and Leave No Trace. We're pleased to welcome Debra Granik. Debra, thank you for doing this.
Oh, I'm so happy to be talking to you both.
Thank you.
We'd love to start with our normal question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Was this something you knew as a kid that you wanted to do, or was it something that you found later? Where did you grow up? What's your story?
I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and I think documentation of the world was my route of entry. I think it was a product of the times that I was coming of age, with the feminist movement and the nuclear disarmament movement, those two convergences, and seeing how important it was to utilize these new tools that were available to be able to easily record. I mean, it had been done, it was more arduous, but it had been done throughout the previous decade and the decades before. And I valued all those historic recordings that had been done, usually on 16. But I was coming into this awareness when video was becoming more ubiquitous. And so that was something that was said to me as a young person, that this is a tool, you put it in your hands and you have to deploy it to make sure that the voices of these movements are understood, that the nuances of what people are fighting for are being recorded. This idea of making lasting evidence was a very big deal at the time. I mean, it always has been in photography, but I guess video was this idea that without anyone's green light, you could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was always a price to pay later if you were ever going to try to finish the piece. But acquiring it, it was said to us, right? Acquiring it was going to be something accessible. And so from there, I'll say that seeing social realist films, my education got furthered by, of course, seeing that tradition primarily in European films, and then later discovering that they were actually in my own film culture as well throughout the 30s, and understanding that there was a way that there was this beautiful marriage that could be constructed between things that people needed and wanted and felt they had to do to survive, which was often documenting real life struggles, but the narrative could sometimes slow it down, organize it, make it very vivid, could possibly even heighten the identification with people. So that's the where I got today, was that marriage of social realist effort married to narrative, you know.
Did your grandfather was a broadcaster, right? He did the American Forum of the Air, I believe. Did that have an influence on you? I mean, your family?
You know, I would love to say it did. And sometimes when I look through some of the boxes, I can't help but be a little bit like, get a goosebump of serendipity or coincidence. I didn't get to know him. So there are times where I've sat with these kind of dusty, they've got such a specific scent, papers that have been in a box for almost, 80, 100 years, 70 years, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, they're in my hand and I see what's written. And I think if I could just ask you just a few questions, But I did not, he was really actually very turned on by radio initially.
Right.
And the Forum of the Air was really a translation of this notion of discussion about events in the world, how to bring that onto this visual medium. But yeah, I did not. How does everyone ever diagnose if it's a little bit in the genes?
Yeah.
But how did you learn the craft? Because it's not something you know offhand, is it?
No. I mean, the craft, what with the video, there was this very, I want to say almost romantic peer-to-peer transmission of skill sets, right? You could go to a center at the time, and people would for no money, you could be told the fundamentals of video shooting. If someone was really proficient, you'd learn a little bit more about lenses. I mean, at that point, we weren't actually, early video didn't have, you couldn't, deploy prime lenses. You couldn't do much with it. It was, but the fact is, critical focus, things like that, those could be transmitted and instructed. And then many years later, after I worked in the field, actually doing health and training videos and educational videos, I put myself back into a training and technical academy, a film school where I could actually hear someone. We would load magazines and learn and do many different tests with the lenses. And that was, of course, the classic setup where lenses are on a table, and then someone I'm going to reference later was in school with me in the film school. We remembered even the stockings, the big lesson on which stockings to use, and those kinds of things you could only get from people who had worked in the field, who had decided to spend some of their time teaching in a film school.
Mm-hmm.
Or was called in as a special. This was Saul Negrin.
Right.
You might know him, the famous stocking lecture. He would always say, after every stocking was put on and he explained its attributes, he would say, "You see what I'm trying to bring out?" And it was pretty special. And so guest lecturers would come in. That is the transmission. I mean, I think so much of filmmaking is passing on tips. And I mean, I know that the gearheads in the film world, the DPs and ACs, I think much more than on the director side, sort of the exchange of knowledge and the proliferation of the ability to recommend and tell people of your experiences and how it worked and whether it was good, and all this kind of exchange. So in film school, you get a little sample of that.
Yeah.
So
you which film school were you at?
I was at NYU.
All right.
Oh,
Right.
Pretty good one.
Of course. So what kind of films were you making there?
Well, I had the outstanding fortune of the mentor that I was, learning under, Eastern European, Latvian, had gone to film school in Moscow, had an ardor for instilling in us what it was like to make films in the Soviet era. And how you basically can not mine in an extractive, ugly way, in the lyrical, beautiful way, but mine everyday life. And had so many films to show us. From his, he loved the Czech New Wave. There wasn't a country that he didn't. There wasn't, out of the 15 former Soviet sisters, there wasn't a single one of those that he didn't show us a film from. And so his name is Boris Fruman. He's very much well and alive. And he really influenced a whole generation of us coming out of NYU. And that left an imprint. And it also really shored up. It made sure that there was going to be some social realists in the U.S. And that was going to be a very big positive cultural imprint that he was going to deliver to at least the East Coast of the U.S.
Yeah, I'm getting ahead a bit, but your films seem much closer to Italian neorealism than they do to Russian movie making, any Russian, even Earth or something like that. They're still kind of quite romantic and political statements, whereas the kind of social realism of Italian cinema post-war, post-World War II, seems closer to where you're at, really. Would that be right?
Oh, I think so. But he brought in those. I mean, we were looking at Il Posto many times.
Right,
You know?
right.
So yes, and he was in love with the Italian use of many people in a frame. He
Yeah,
loved to show
yeah.
us, the four brothers were going to be in the frame. This idea of the wider, the use of the up there with them, but 4 to 5 people, really disabusing
Yeah.
us of the constant close up on the face. He was really rebelling, about this idea of the American overexposure of the face and the close up and the need for that, which always required or seemed to require a certain kind of beauty evaluation, and so here's someone who is actually saying what they're doing with their knee in this scene is probably equally important to what's happening on their face, what they're holding in their hand or what they're what they're secretly passing in the schoolroom, all of those things, and he wanted to make sure, and he loved, of course, like all the social realists, people doing real processes in the frame. Right. So frequently not separating the person from what they're doing, with their hands.
Right.
Yeah.
But also using real people rather than actors. I mean, real people, actors are real people, but not non-actors. I mean, I'm thinking of, a lot of Italian neorealism. I mean, Terra Trema, Visconti's Terra Trema is one of my favorite films, because it's about a fishing community, and that's kind of where my background. But they're all non-actors, it's kind of a magnificent piece. Did that have an influence on you as well? Because you've worked a lot with non-actors, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I adore that. I adore the idea that somebody does something in their real life and that they could populate the film and add that. It's not just that, the word authenticity gets overused.
Yeah.
But they're going to perform a process that can be photographed that I want in the film. I mean, I'd love to have it in the film. And the other thing is sometimes you can't ask someone to do something as specifically as someone who performs that in real life. And so if the person who does perform that task or that job or that process in their life is willing to be in the film, I would love to find a way to incorporate that. I think anyone that tries to combine trained professional actors with people from their real lives will come across some very intense testing. And it can be quite humbling. I mean, more than humbling, right? Because there's a couple almost like respectful boundaries that have to be abided. And frequently it's as basic or as obvious as you can't really ask so frequently for people to perform things that they don't do in their real life. You almost, perjure is kind of a heavy word. But then again, sometimes you can. If something takes a very long time and you said to this non-professional, time's up. You have to make this last, you have to knead this last bread, not how you would normally do it, but the house is on fire. You have to knead it really quickly and then run out of the door or something. They would probably, if the direction could probably be adjusted for some people, but I'm just trying to say that it's not something that one cavalierly just assumes that the world's your oyster and you just, because you want it, you can get it. No.
And how do you get the performances out of non-professionals? Because, your movies always have such, well, you would think they were actors, but they're not, obviously, a
Right.
lot of them.
And they seem kind of effortless. I
Yeah,
don't
and they're
feel
not
like
that kind of stiffness that oftentimes you find. How do you do
even with
that?
actors.
Well, I love to rely on an example in my mind because it clarifies the best case scenario, which is a person who has, as I was speaking about, like the experience. So, for example, in the film Winter's Bone,
Mhm.
when we were scouting and we sat in some local places to meet people and get some advice and fact check our script and get some insights, a person that made himself available to us was a very burly, bearded man from the region. And he physically embodied someone that I was imagining could portray this sort of patriarchal heavy in the family, someone who had lived a lot of years and had a lot of protocol and understood how to adjudicate things in a complicated way, complicated family way. And sure enough, this person, he hadn't been involved in any in quite the same way with a black market life but he knew what this honor was in the Ozarks, and he knew what how you might talk to someone when things were getting very tense and things had to be clarified. So he was no stranger. His biker life had taught him what a dress down was, So he was no stranger to the idea that conversation would have a cadence. And now he went off script. Well, he didn't have a script, so he knew what the premise was, but he got very colorful. I don't think I want to repeat it on your podcast. He got very, very colorful with a very anatomical description of a threat, and the actor was blown back against the wall. It didn't go well, and I had to take Ron aside and say, Ron, you're being very effective. You're getting your message across to, in this case, the actor. However, this time, just when you said your piece, don't follow up, but just continue to look at him. Because the follow-up was when he got heated and the expletives started to pour out.
Right.
So he understood that he would say this one piece. He'd say part A, but not part B.
Right. And a lot could be done then just in his appearance and his gaze.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like we talk about Winter's Bone, but it seems to me like Winter's Bone is the end of 3 movies that kind of have a theme and kind of one leads to the next one. And personally, I really love Down to the Bone, which is the middle of those. But tell us how Snake Feed came about, which is the first film, your first
short,
film, I believe, the short. And I'm presuming that was all non-actors, but tell us, how did that come about, that situation? I mean,
well, Snake Feed was completely part of the film school experience. That's a film that one must go and make in the progression of the years that you spend in the school, and that's the 16 millimeter narrative at the time. And I had done some exercises. Boris had sent us out into the field. One of the assignments was to go someplace you've never been and ask someone who does something that you've not done in your own life if you could observe them and photograph them. And thus I did. And I happened to be photographing a housekeeper who worked in a small upstate New York inn. I made some sound recordings about her interior thoughts, and it was set to the imagery of her cleaning. This Victorian, it's not a mansion, but it was a very, very ornate inn where the people had restored it. A lot of brocade, a lot of satiny, very, very photogenic, very photogenic. This is black and white, but luminosity and windows and backlighting and all the stuff you love so much, Roger. Like just the way the curtains did everything you needed them to do. And I said, I called her up after I loved the footage in the black and white exercise, and I said, some things you told me about just being very newly sober really struck me. I went back to the city and I kept thinking about you. And I know this is so weird. I just met you and I'm calling you and I'm bringing up some, almost like a very intimate question. I'm saying, I think the circumstances of your life are extremely intense, and the way you described them to me left a very big impression. Could I come back up and we talk about the idea of possibly making a small film together? And she said,
Wow.
yes. Yeah. So the research was then kind of done on video, right? I would return with my video camera and record something, quotidian things, putting the kids to bed, having them feed their pet snake. Then
that was quite a scene, that feeding the pet snake. I never knew that they actually were fed with live mice, but there we go. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
That's what you took away.
But we'll see. We'll talk about that. A scene that cannot be shown in the UK. A scene that had to be cut out.
Yes, I wondered about that. I was actually quite shocked. I was surprised. I mean, it was like watching those Scorpion and Sam Peckinpah's movies getting burnt.
But but just to be, we can go down that, but not in a big way. But no. I just want to say that that was part of her responsibility. The kids, to keep that snake alive, you have to buy the mice,
right?
And then you have to So that snake only eats when it absolutely has to and when it's hungry,
right.
Never gratuitously. So there's no extra mouse or anything like that. So it's a one-time take.
Yeah, it's a real thing, yeah.
And we had to coordinate it to when the snake was hungry, of course. But so she was so gracious and she was excited. It was also a very positive, here's this person. This is sometimes a very charming part of our work, which is when it strikes well, when it's, I guess, sincere, when someone takes an interest in your life and then, says the things you're going through, the things you do, the things you say are very thought-provoking. And she was very motivated to talk to her boyfriend at the time and see if he wanted to participate. She was very willing to talk to her two young sons and explain why there would be this crew of students coming, all 8 of us, why there would be this dead cat on a big long pole dangling over them, And that was also the very beautiful collaborative convergence of my creative path with my classmate, Michael McDonough,
right?
Who I know.
Yeah.
And we were in the same course and being influenced by the same Eastern European mentor, Boris. And we were doing that shoot. And he really, he took a shine to this way of working, of course, which was to be very, very agile and create least amount of disturbance to them being able to perform some of their real life activity. And then, of course, we had takes and we had coverage. So it's not the only single take is the snake's meal. Everything else we did coverage.
Glad to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But how did the structure of the film come about? I mean, is it like part documentary, part reminiscence? But did you kind of script it? How did you kind of form the basis of it?
That is a process where she told me many stories about what it's like to try to get clean and how it doesn't frequently happen on the first many tries. She told me stories about the way that you could even be trying to get clean and there would be ways to derail, even though you're ostensibly participating in something like a methadone program. So she gave me the research or the evidence of what it's like to go through what she was going through. And I did format that into a loose script. But in the filming, for example, when someone thinks they might exchange pills for a dog, her boyfriend had done it, not exchanged a dog, but he had conducted unsavory discussions, copping drugs many a time in his life. The actor, it was so lucky, the one that had a little more training, had also had a hustle in his life. I mean, who among us cannot, no one who hasn't been a scrappy, street-savvy hustler can write for a scrappy, street-savvy
Right.
hustler.
Yeah.
They write the best lines for themselves. So for sure, some of it, but they knew the premise of the scene. So this is something you've heard a lot, right? For anyone that can permit some level of improvisation, is that the premise of the scene is crystal clear. They knew the objective. They knew so well that someone was going to get pills and someone was going to try to pawn off his dog in exchange for those pills.
Mm-hmm.
They knew the outcome.
Mm.
And the variation in the takes is something that I do pay a price for in editing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I frequently don't have takes that are identical.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to be willing to perform sometimes a non-traditional cut if I want to. Not always, but sometimes luck will have it, right? That our coverage not saves us, but provides for us. And other times, the best line that you love only occurred once, and it only occurred in that one value, and it has to be that way if you want to use that take.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. You know, Jean-Luc Godard was having trouble cutting Breathless, and Jean-Pierre Melville kind of went and looked at the material and gave him some advice, and he said, well, just cut the best pieces of the takes together. And that became French New Wave. Right? It's a true story.
Yeah, well, it's so refreshing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because occasionally, many times actually in filmmaking, you have to, you hear about another filmmaker who's done the unthinkable, or another cinematographer, or another member of any part of the art form who sort of does the unthinkable. And then you realize occasionally it's refreshing, important, crucial to do the unthinkable. You know, I don't mean harming. I don't mean, unthinkable in terms of risk towards life. I mean unthinkable in terms of traditions, protocols, and decorum about how we think we're supposed to film or edit, and yeah, that can apply to many other teams in the film, in the total crew. The unthinkable of using people's real life wardrobe versus having doubles and triplicates.
Yeah.
Shock horror.
Right. But it was the best option. It was the best option.
Yeah.
You can distress and distress. You can distress someone's work clothes. You can distress them and distress them. But the distress that they put on them cannot be rivaled, And
Yeah.
what does it matter if they're, total rain and having the clothes get wet? Of course, that's a problem. But should there be a fleck of food or something different? One can live with this.
Yeah. So that's Down to the Bone, which I've said, we really thought it was a fantastic portrait of addiction. But there must have been, then, was that more scripted? Because you had an actress in the lead role, again, but placed in a situation with non-actors, as I understand.
And it must take a certain kind of actor that can work with non-actors, because I think some actors would be thrown.
Oh, and that just kind of cues me to sing the praises of actors that can do that. It is one of the most beautiful things to withhold because of the deep drawdown. First of all, it says so much about that actor in terms of being able to draw from inside, from something, some sibling that you've cared for, done something for, needed, worried about, some parent that you've done the same for, somebody, and that will come through. But with Vera, it was, again, one of these beautiful coincidences where we were filming in her where she was really living in her true life, in her everyday Vera life, It was in a place called Ulster County, New York, which is about 2 hours north of the city. And her neighbor, when I asked a question about someone who might be able to advise us about a turkey scene, she's like, you got to talk to my neighbor, Walt. We involve Walt. Walt knew how to talk to Vera. Walt had a very soft spot for Vera. Walt always brought Vera a taxidermied deer as a gift, annually. Um,
Oh,
and
really? Wow. So the scenes in the film, right?
right, and we said to Walt, Walt, would you consider doing a scene that gives a really good impression and recreates what it's like when you give Vera a deer head? And he's like, I guess so. And so he knocked on her door and he said, oh, I always cover it with a sheet to walk across the lane so that it doesn't get harmed. And then production put a sheet that had flowers on it. And he objected and he said, I would never I don't have any sheets that have flowers.
That's great.
And so we took that off and put a plain sheet on. And Vera answered the door as she really would. And so in that situation, he felt so good with her and so comfortable that he could really give her the deer head as he had done in the past. And his direction was this most basic one, like really listen to Vera and really answer.
Mm-hmm.
So Vera knew the scene and Vera knew and if he answered differently, Vera could rebound immediately. Right. So
Wow.
if he, said something that was not going to work for the scene, she could get it back on track.
Mm-hmm.
Some lines, again, you can't write. So she said, Walt, where do you think I should place it? When she auditioned different spots on the wall. And he said, I think it will look best or it will look very good on this knotty pine.
I remember that.
And and she agreed. And then she decided to agree with him. And how to end a scene like that. She thanks him so much. And they probably had a certain tacit way that they parted, which is she would thank him. And he kind of knew that was his cue to say goodbye.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit then, but which came first, the script or Vera or the location? So how did the film come together? And actually, how did you get finance for it as well? There's so many questions.
Okay. So location came first because it was all the research to do Snake Feed that Corinne had been the guide. And in working with her, we had met people, places, and things.
Mm-hmm.
We knew, and that enabled us to go scout that there really was a rehabilitation center that was extremely special to that region because it was exclusively for working class people who were contending with chemical dependency. And it was very much germane to this area. It's not the West Coast version it's a very down to earth, very, very salt of the earth. Part of the American,
Malibu,
the American experience. No espresso at this one, So every inch of the way, the geography and the real places were they're influencing the script. When Vera came along, she added Walt by just the fact that we scouted. When I asked him the questions about the turkeys, I saw the turkeys. We saw the deer head. She mentioned that he gifts them. So that ended up being in the script.
Mm-hmm.
So the script was growing as the locations and Vera were adding, and other experts in their field. The rehabilitation, a counselor that deals with chemical dependency was informing how some of the group sessions might look and feel. And then luck would have it that the rehab said yes. There's a huge issue with anonymity with recovering from chemical dependency, but they viewed it as a creative opportunity to ask people who wanted to be involved. The camera couldn't go anywhere except the function room where we were permitted to be to preserve anonymity and protect people there. But there were a goodly number that wanted to participate. So some people that were in that circle didn't feel well. They were in the throes of it, and I thought to myself, that's going to be revealed. There'll be a vibe in the room that will suggest that, and that will be transmitted through their real lived experience. So there is a concurrent, to answer your question, things are happening concurrently in that sense, that I am a very porous individual, and people, places, color of the sky, those will influence me sometimes to a problematic level, but the script will keep growing until the day we shoot because of those influences always coming towards you as a filmmaker. Unless you seal yourself off, you're not safe. You're not even safe during the take because someone will do something. Your young actress will ask for salt for the 7th hard-boiled egg she has to bite into. And that wasn't in the script, but she truly needed the salt at that point.
Yeah. All right.
It was hurting,
How much time did you have with Vera and other members of the cast that were non-actors? I mean, how much time did they spend together before the actual shoot period?
Well, I do love rehearsal, and that is something that I felt. I'll just say one word about that because I think it's special, and I want to honor a tradition that came out of Utah and out of the Sundance Laboratory experience, where Robert Redford, as when he used to be very, very active in trying to transmit some of the things he wanted us to know and value as filmmakers coming up. And one of them was rehearsal. Never killing it, never drying it out, never wearing it down, save it for the day. But he was like, why do we think that you're supposed to come in and call it in? Whatever happened to that art, that other part of the exploratory art of the filmmaking process? So I was very influenced by that. But I also needed it. I needed it so badly. I needed it to hear what Vera's coming into the scene with. What is the actor bringing just on her own or on his own? I needed it to see what part of the scene was truly not working. I don't want to know that on the day. I want to know that before.
Yeah.
I'm a very self-conscious filmmaker. I feel a big obligation to the entire collaborative army that's making this film. And so I want to have some things ironed out before. Yeah, so that the rehearsal becomes very vital. We did have time. Vera gave so generously of her time. That's not always possible for budgetary reasons. But in this, I think because we could come to her and she didn't have to leave home. It made such a difference. It made such a difference, She didn't have to travel out and be gone from her life to do some of this work. And and then the person that played her boyfriend is a Canadian, a former, well, I think he is still a rock star. Or he definitely was at the time. He was a beloved rock star he was across the lake. He was just over the river, over the lake from Buffalo, and we had seen him in a Canadian film and really enjoyed his performance. And it turns out, I don't think I'm blowing up his spot. He was open about this. I think he's been open. But he had a long and tumultuous, super strong wrestle down with heroin. And so brought very somatic, body-driven understanding of what it's like to be sober, to try really hard, to maintain that, to work on it hour by hour, day by day, to relapse, to experience the defeat, the self-loathing, the multiple, the roller coaster of all of it. So he contributed hugely on that front. And the life models had already provided so much of that. I was hugely educated. By the time I did this film, although that chemical dependency had never been my own personal issue, I had been informed by firsthand experiencers at a level that I felt I had a pretty hardcore impression of that climb to kind of reach Mount Everest, which is to be sober,
Well, how did you get the funding for it?
The funding, there was no funding. This film was done.
Oh, well, that was easy then.
Yeah. This film was put in the can for $200,000, and there was no can, unfortunately. There was only ones and zeros. It was put in its little cassette case. But what I was going to say is it was coming off of that spirit of both Dogma and indigent movements. The idea that if you couldn't get greenlit for a subject matter that you thought was the best story you had on hand to tell, the next best option was to greenlight yourself and make it by any means necessary. And I'm going to reference Michael again, Michael McDonough, because it takes a special kind of emerging cinematographer at the time to put an ego aside, and that he is absolutely willing to come on board with a video body, with a contraption that was invented in Germany in the early aughts to allow you to put prime lenses on a handy cam, basically,
Yeah.
and do your best. Do your best. Because how else are we ever going to learn if we can't make that first film?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and-
Exactly.
And he understood that when you film for 20 days, you don't put down tracks. You don't even use a jib. You know,
Mhm.
it's like you do what you can to make sure that within those 20 days, the story is photographed to the best of your ability, you know. And I mean, thank God you can appreciate this. I think, you know, kinos were just also coming in. You know, there was a way to do a faster lighting process for social realist films. I don't mean for ornate or elegant or period, but I just mean,
Mm.
you know, a way to
Mhm.
sort of just make sure that you're up there with your luminance enough to be able to say, we're pretty much okay. So the conditions were right. People were inspired by Dogma, by the Danes. Not all the, you know, maybe not all the fussy rules or whatnot, but the spirit behind it. You know, what was it? What was it said? It was said that not all of us can lumber under this behemoth that became these industrial film practices.
Mm.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I was really agreeing with that because that's what I was facing. This film would have never been financed. We were told, oh, a big Hollywood star just did a film about 28 days in a rehab. But it was about a posh rehab for very wealthy people to get clean. And I said, well, wait a minute. This has nothing to do with that world. This is a very different world. And they're like, oh God, but posh people getting clean somehow is a little bit more fun and interesting. You know? It's like,
Oh, gosh.
so, but
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So no, that sounds bitter. All I meant was we had the ability to greenlight ourselves. Why not?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how did you work with Michael? I mean, in terms of the shooting of it, did he come to rehearsals? Did you work things out previously, or was it all on the day?
No, he is a really in-depth and passionate scouter, you know. And so by being in these locations, he got his own ideas of what we might do, what we might need. He was very, I mean, I think, you know, this must be across the board for DPs, I think. I can only imagine. But if you end up having positive rapport with some of the lead actors, they become like muses, right? And there were certain mannerisms that he saw in rehearsals with Vera that he knew he wanted to capture. Same thing with Hugh Dillon, her co-lead. You know, one of the children, non-professional, seemed to want to always do his scene from underneath the table. It was very hard to get him to come above, you know, like he'd say one line, then he'd duck under. It was this ninja thing that he had going. And, you know, Michael's like, it's okay for him to leave frame. We don't have to retrain him. Let him do his thing, you know.
Yeah.
And one take, I can go under the table. It's no problem. You know, he was young. He had knee pads on. He could just kneel down if he needed to, you know. And Michael is someone who was always working like a ballet dancer with the AC, you know, so that if people don't have to hit marks, they'll follow, you know, they'll follow the best they can. Maybe marks are more for lighting actually, you know, than for focus. And so I had the camaraderie and the team spirit that was going to enable the film to be made in this way. And Michael being the helmer of that spirit, you know. But yes, he takes huge amount of creative notes in rehearsals, and he takes, it could be thousands of stills in the Scout. And in addition to all that, right, the classic of we pour over other people's films. You know, you can only imagine some of the UK, Irish, and Scottish, well, UK, but, you know, English, Scottish, and Irish filmmakers that he references like the back of his hand, you know. And so we frequently make a tear book or a lookbook that has these favorite images. They're from docs and narratives, so that's a big role he plays. Big.
It's interesting because I mean, Ken Loach's films come to mind in many ways, but I don't think your film. I mean, how can I put this? Well, I don't think your films have that sort of romantic edge that Ken Loach's films have. I mean, especially Kaz, but I mean, his other films as well. They're working class, whatever that is, but they have a kind of romance to them. But your films are very direct and very straight, sort of.
Which really brings you into the
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought Down to the Bone was quite remarkable, really. It's a remarkable film.
Well,
So
I was
from
going to
that,
bust
how
in.
did
Wait.
you-
I have to bust in. I have to say thank you. I've been quiet. You've said some positive things about my filmmaking, and I haven't been thanking you because I don't want to sort of jam up the podcast. But I had to just jump in and say your appreciation of the work means a lot to me.
Oh, thank you. So, but then the third film I think in this trilogy or whatever
Yeah, right.
is Winter's Bone, which seems, I don't know, maybe we think now it's more constructed because we know Jennifer Lawrence is now a big film star. But she wasn't back then. She was begging for you to give her the part, apparently. And I think at one point she was deemed too pretty or something. But anyway, where did that film come from? And it's a sort of progression, isn't it? It seems more structured.
It is, because that is an adaptation from a novel.
Right.
And so it's very structured. Daniel Woodrell wrote an extremely, I want to say, classic structure of mystery and of dark fairy tales, because he really exploited, the idea that a young protagonist has a mission they must accomplish, right? And that they're warned not to go further. And when they don't heed that warning, there are very difficult ramifications. They're tested even further, right? And so his structure was beautifully honed. And so in that way, it was very structured. And then my process did kick in the adaptation process, which is local folks started to influence the script. And our version, our adaptation of the novel was becoming infused with local knowledge. I mean, Daniel's from the region, so it was filled with knowledge. But we were shooting in a different part of the Ozarks, actually. And so it was super important that right there, right then, we were getting some information from people that were going to host us. The family that was going to allow us to shoot in their holler had to inform us about certain things, and especially script verification. I had taken some lines that were very tantalizing to me because they were in dialect that is not my own. But I had to be informed by the family that was hosting us. Maybe our grandmother said that, but we don't say that anymore. I mean, that would be highly improbable, and it would sound very odd for you to keep that in the script. So we had these local advisors that were fact-checking and helping us, infusing, and then they started to bring out important elements. The 17 dogs that were in their holler, we knew we had to utilize them. They were going to cross-frame whether we wanted them to or not. So they had to be, no animals were wrangled for this shoot. They were there. We knew that, for example, something lyrical that the little sister she would use her own toys. I didn't know what props those would be, but she said, these are what I play with. And then when she did something very odd that, of course, any photographer would love, which is to be on a small trampoline with a sort of substantial brown pony at the same time. Yeah. I'm like, oh boy, that's not going to occur in anyone's script. The child has to produce that for you and say, this is how I play. And I would say, and Michael would say, oh my goodness, Debra, I love that. Let's have Ashley do her thing, and I'm right here, and I'm ready to roll. And this is, and a child's so easy with play. It's so easy to even do 6 takes.
Yeah, right.
Right. Ashley, can you do that again? Can you jump a little higher with, so the script was once again deeply infused by not just locals, but the locations themselves. Some things were not in the original novel. The cattle auction was not in the original novel.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out that people were informing us when people are doing well, when someone is in a holler that has some really quality land, they can have a small herd. And that herd, when the price is right and the economy is stable, cow by cow, those can be auctioned. And that is a very small source of revenue, but nonetheless significant. And I thought that was very important and relevant to this family. So little pieces came in. Horses. I didn't know maybe that they would keep horses. Horses felt like a very expensive proposition, and they are. But because you might be someone who's cash poor doesn't mean you don't want certain things that feel extremely rich and meaningful to your life, like raising up and taking care of a horse. But it turns out that there could be a huge stress with feeding it. So that informed the script so much.
Yeah.
Easy to have the horse can become very, very high pressured and tormenting when cash is low and the horse is hungry. So those things were very powerful to hear about. I got very waylaid. I mean, I got waylaid. I had to take it out. We filmed it, but I had to take it out of the script. It was some things. This is when I was telling you that my method can get me into the deepest of trouble, which is I was, as an East Coast middle-class person, I asked people in the area, why you all are 40? Why do so few of you have your teeth? Why are there signs for dentures, billboards for dentures everywhere in the Ozarks? And they proceeded to explain why. And I had wanted to put a scene about that in the film. And we filmed something, it was just too far afield. It was, you can't cover everything, but it felt so monumental to me. It felt so, but that was me mixing up my mission too. I felt really obligated to somehow put that in. Secretly, probably the hope there is like, oh, call attention. People don't lose their teeth because they want to, they don't lose their teeth because they're bad people. Poverty is a very distinct cause of the inability to keep your teeth. And I just wanted to make that correlation. So the place influences me a lot is the conclusion there,
Did you face any resistance from anyone locally?
We armored ourselves in the right kind of way. Can I just say one? I know I'm harping on this because I'm speaking to a team that has US and UK sensibilities and knowledge, right? Right. So this was a US UK sensibility situation. One of the first, we made a faux pas, which is Michael and our producing partner, Anne Rossellini, and we did start scouting, kind of going up some driveways, which we shouldn't have been doing, and asking a couple questions. And we heard a shotgun in the air, and that means not pointed at us, but just like, wait a minute, what's going on? You're coming up my driveway unannounced? Who are, But then when the person came forward, Michael at that time still had a very distinct Scottish accent, Glaswegian accent, and the guy was really interested. He immediately gave Michael the time of day because he's like, "You're not from around these parts, are you?" And he wanted to, and he was just excited to meet Michael, and that one ended well. But after that, we had the amazing, and any film team again knows what that means. And I was devastated. I read some article where the term fixer and a film crew that relies on a fixer was so devastatingly dissed. My heart just crushed. But I'm using this in a way, I'm trying to own my limits, right? I'm from one region, I'm from one narrow path, like many of us are, right? You're born into one social class, one racialized body, one gender, one location, East Coast. That's who I am. To make a film in a region that's not my own, we did want someone from there to be the person that was going to be the boots on the ground liaison and informant guide, telling us what is okay and not okay, how we should meet with people. And he made a beautiful protocol. Bring the script, have people read it, sit down and talk to them about it. Ask them again, what feels right, what feels wrong. And we got feedback that Daniel Woodrell from the region had made a heroine that they love. She was like a folk hero. This character, they felt good about her. What region couldn't, frankly, right? She's fighting for all the right things that people from the region say are classic hill values. Trying to hang on to your property, make it last, make it do without, augmenting food sources, knowledge of use of wild game and hunting, all these skill sets that they felt she had to have if she was going to represent them well. And it checked those boxes. So the story checked off and checked out. So we were in good stead. And they love to take the piss out of us. They called us city slickers until deep in. But they asked questions, we asked questions. They asked, why do you all wear black? Weird, And they said, how come you don't know how to hunt squirrels? What do you mean that, what do you mean that you could not provide for yourself? You could not obtain your own dinner in the woods?
Sure.
Those kinds of questions. So there is cultural exchange, and some of it's fun and some of it's heavy. And this was filmed in 2000. It was filmed in 2009. So the United States did not have the division of red and blue as demarcated. It had city and coastal. It had class demarcations. It had other kinds of demarcations. But we got in under the radar, not the radar, under the wire of this ultra bifurcation, and the mistrust they had of us because we were there in person. They could ask it to our face and vice versa. So the in-person contact, can you believe it all these years later? Can you believe that we have to say in real life contact, in IRL?
Right. Yeah.
I know.
Well, did you show them the movie at the end? And
People.
What was their reaction?
That's my truck. That's my Carhartt. Oh, look at the dog. It was like, it's of us, and a lot of it's by us, I think the reaction was very strong. I think I had an incident where I felt very much about the possibility of betrayal and kind of a sullied feeling where the family's house was described in a very non-flattering term in a film review. And I was like, oh gosh, what have I done? That's their real home. So if you're going to use an adjective that most people think is very pejorative, what have I done? I've asked this family to allow us to film in their house, and then it gets described in a way that's I don't believe to this day that they saw that. There was no reason for them to ever see that, in the sense that it was a big city review, and ultimately the reviewer very much liked the story, but just felt necessary to describe sort of what they found to be maybe looking abject. And, I was going to say, well, this is what living humbly does look like, or can look like, in this instance. So
can you talk about casting? Because also in Winter's Bone, you had John Hawkes and Garrett Dillahunt as well, who we've known and worked with. Apart from Jennifer Lawrence, how did you go about casting? They're three wonderful actors. Certainly Jennifer was pretty unknown at the time.
Four wonderful actors.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Dale Dickey was in it, and yeah. And yes, and Tate. So John was a wonderful choice. My producing partner, Anne, had really wondered about different things he could do. And she had seen, he was exhibiting a lot of range, and he had also been involved, I guess, for years, right? By that time, he had been in the TV, an ongoing episodic, right, that dealt with the Wild West, I believe. Deadwood,
Yes.
Deadwood, yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't know him from that, but I really appreciated the level that he responded to the script and the story. And it was clear that he wraps his head around things. He had grown up in a small town in different region, but in Minnesota. So he knew something about small town life, and he knew something about, and I want to say his method is very much to listen, to sit in a bar in the region. He came down early on his own to listen and listen to cadence. He loves rhythmic. He's a musician as well. So it puts a huge amount of effort and passion into listening to the sonorous qualities of things. And I think he loved the classic, tragic qualities of this uncle, I think he knew that there was something very, very noble, that he had a lot of room in there. When someone has so many conflicting components to their personality. And I think he got very jazzed at the idea of ricocheting from learned habits to opening his heart up when someone dear to him did need him, simultaneously against the formidable foe of a chemical dependency. So he took this material and really clawed his way in, and I think Jennifer really gave him a lot to work from. And she's you asked earlier about actors that can be the malleable ones, the porous and responsive part of the dyad, and she has that in spades, like Vera. And I would say John is more, he creates like very arduous study for himself. And in that sense, he is sticking to things that he's come up with and rehearsed and thought about. And she's able to respond with different valences, with ease. So that they gave each other a lot. Again, I was referring to that I think all the people in the filmmaking team, behind the camera, next to the camera, everybody knows when chemistry is working.
Right.
And it gets exciting. I mean, a scene can actually be tense as heck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in the flesh it is, like there's something that's happened. And a couple scenes with Jen and John Hawkes were very much in that vein of he was authentically intimidating her, not in an untoward way, in the right kind of way for the character. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also like the woman next door who was so tough, but also had a heart, but you didn't feel she was soft at all. I liked her a lot. I thought
it's just a wonderful mix of characters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a wonderful portrait of a place and characters. I'm just curious. I read Ben Foster, who you cast in Leave No Trace, your last film, which is also quite wonderful. I read that when you were going through the script with him, that you took out a lot of dialogue, that he was one of those actors who we've known some, like Javier and Benicio del Toro, who kind of likes taking dialogue out and tries to do it visually,
Yes. And that was, I think, again, because Leave No Trace is an adaptation from a novel.
Yeah.
There are times when I don't even know a way around this. You feel very obligated to the best of your ability to also take all that you have been turned on to by in the novel and try to put it in the script. Meanwhile, balancing the fact that you're changing things very dramatically in the adaptation for Leave No Trace from the book My Abandonment. The adaptation is quite tremendous in terms of tremendous is not the word. It's substantial, okay, in terms of changes. Ben very much latched on to this person spoke in a very formal, I don't want to say cryptic, but I want to say, I think we would call it at this point, we would call it non-normative maybe, or I don't, the father character was a man of few words. It was almost like he had taken that Bergman vow, if you don't have something really good to say, you don't say it, but that was part of what he was going through, the secrecy and the terseness and the idea that if you give a kid too much explanation about anything, they're going to ask a whole lot more questions. You keep it terse, keep it tight. run a tight ship. And he's doing all that in service to the feeling that that's creating the safest dynamic. And Ben really his mind aligned with that mentality that he was gleaning about the father, and very much wanted to, go further with that. And so I think, again, that will work if you've got if the co-player, if the person who you're playing against can be malleable,
Right.
can interpret things, can react to those expressions without needing the stimulus for let's say, the combative line or the dictate or So sometimes to adjust for the removal of lines, you end up working with your other actor to have them sometimes maybe augment something they're saying that allows the perception that they've read their dad correctly, they've read their so-and-so, the person across from them. So it can be challenging, though. That's a situation where a director can become very, very uncertain, right? Is there enough in the script? Is that, part of what I heard a recent Scandinavian filmmaker just say on the BBC the other night, the script is this sort of insurance, right? That a lot of directors, that we've got it on the page, it's there, we've conceived it, and we've rehearsed it, and we think we're hoping to heck it's going to work. Then you take out a bunch of it and you're like, oh, am I okay? Is this, does he still read? Is there enough here? So I would say very audacious process for all involved.
It's funny because they're taking away the dialogue. It gives the character much more depth and mystery. You actually feel much more of his suffering, even though you know literally less about it, if you understand what I'm saying.
Now,
So much is done just visually, and the kind of his gestures and his looking out the window, his way he walks. I mean, it's really quite a beautiful performance. But as you say, it relies on also with the interchange with his daughter in the film, who was Thomasin Harcourt Mackenzie. Yes, who I didn't know.
Yeah. No, but you're absolutely right. And what's the definition? What was the all-time sort of not to be violated rule about a hero, right? A hero is terse, because any hero, or any protagonist, for the exact reasons you just uttered, the more that you have to lean in and try to decipher someone, the more the viewer is working and trying to make sure, am I getting this person? Did I read that right? If a person over-explains themselves, they become too forward, not enough for us to lean into, right? As they would say in the Ozarks, you've just said too much. You've over-explained yourself,
Yeah. It's a strange connection, but you could think of Clint Eastwood in the spaghetti westerns, the man with no name and hardly ever talks.
That's where that rule came from.
Yes. Yeah. I know what the film says to me, but what were you trying to say in the film by having your main character leave his daughter and kind of walk off into the emptiness?
I think there's a level at which non-conforming people can't rejoin the world. And, I always had to do it. I had to do it in great gradations. I had to make sure the script went through so many permutations about how it was going to resolve. You can imagine there was a resolution where she got him to stay at that last location where she said, hey, this is a bunch of non-conforming people. You'll be okay here. There were permutations where there were versions where he didn't make it because he had a catastrophic event. He got injured. The book had written that he actually didn't make it for a whole different, he was killed, So, that's the novel. And in my mind, I had to make my peace with that. He triaged this. He could only kind of scout ahead. I don't think he thinks he's leaving her forever. I think the way that the filming turned out, and I think Michael has a lot to say about this, you can't help but think that. And that's fine. I'm open to interpretation there. I don't mean anything goes. I just mean we don't know. After the last frame, we never know, right, what happens.
Right.
Unless,
except for the daughter puts the food on the
Right, for
tree,
the bear man.
expecting him.
Yeah, we
Right.
thought
Yeah.
he was living with the bear man.
right. So exactly that was an option, right? That's an option that, and then I had seen prior to filming, I saw a very poetic documentary, I must add, not pandering to you, but by a British crew about Vietnam vets in the Olympic Peninsula who could never return. They were living in what's called U.S. wilderness, which is uncharted, unpatrolled wilderness, bona fide wilderness, off the grid at the level where you would have to have an informant almost disclose the location. So the crew proceeded very carefully, but they actually got a few of these guys to come forward and explain why they were living as recluses in this wilderness, so that people can disappear at that level physically into the woods. They are not detected unless people go hunting for them. Now we have all this technology that would immediately detect them. And this really informed how I felt at peace. But I felt that the father witnessed the interactions, and that his daughter had made some positive connections at this place. The bee scene was supposed to serve. That his daughter says, a person can withstand this many stings. And he sees his daughter, who he's kind of made so adept and trained her to be very self-sufficient, and instilled her with a lot of, I want to say, confidence and moxie, that he felt if he were unable to sustain his existence there, that she would be in a safe place. So the abandonment was going to be with these almost, I want to say, safety checks in place. I was also influenced by Miranda, in The Tempest, and her father, her father accepts that his daughter is different than he is, and that she's able to have a fresh take on the world, and that she is at this point in her life what we would call romantic, in the sense that she doesn't see she's not experiencing mental illness, and she doesn't see all the threats of the world. She's seeing the possibilities of the world. And so those were very positive influences on the storytelling decision to have them part ways.
Well, something that came across to me very strongly, which I don't know, intent or not, is just how we are born into being part of society, whether we like it or not. And the world's a complex place, but we have to be part of it. There is no option. I mean, there are many people sleeping on the beach here in Santa Monica. And there, to me, there's similar people that have come back from Vietnam or wherever with PSD and have just said, no, enough. But I think it's a very real issue somehow that there is no escape. Once you're born, this is it.
Right. No, and I was very attached to thinking about that over and over as I was working on this. The options for non-conforming are very small. State and public order is designed to have the highest, it needs, for us to have these city-states that function with bureaucracies, the standard is conformity. So, and I think, however, I will say the world has made great strides in understanding neurodivergence. The world has made great strides in understanding that so much of this is not volitional. You don't just whip someone back into your definition of normalcy. You don't confine them and torture them and harm them. That the human brain has a huge amount of variation. And then on top of that, we have other things that can, further cause non-conforming behavior. We've talked about it a lot today, which is one of the primary ones would be addiction and dependency. And, but so I agree with you very, very strongly that non-conforming is a dangerous topic. It is it is the fuel of civilization. And but non-conforming individuals frequently pay a price. And obviously some non-conforming behavior is not volitional. So I don't want to make it like it's all that it's just this decision. I think also some veterans really informed the thinking too. Post-traumatic growth. This father is not an example of post-traumatic growth. This father was an example of, to me, very arresting form of adaptation. To decide to try to live with your military skills undetected for a long time, so that you could fashion the world a little bit more for the psychiatric condition that you now have, that's a very interesting proposition. But I would say that one of the subsequent areas of interest I have that's very big right now in my life is the idea of post-traumatic growth. And that's being studied very much with both veterans and many different people who've been through the prison system in any of the countries that imprison in brutal ways. And it's very, but I didn't, this character, that was tragic in the sense that he was fragile, and his psychiatry, the brain that he had and the nervous system he had was not designed to withstand combat and come out okay. He had a basic,
And yet, in a way, also the ending, to me, is a positive example of such love on both sides, because he loves her so much that he knows he's got to let her go. She loves him so much that she knows he's got to go. And that's the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a quote that I read of you. You once said that the word dark is the scariest 4-letter word in American storytelling. Can you expand on that? I mean, I want to ask you, why are there so films that treat real issues, society, the way we are, like your films do? Why are there so few of them, and why have you made so few films? Is it because dark is a 4-letter word?
Well, but what's interesting is, what is the definition of dark? I was getting
as a cinematographer, that could be anywhere. But no, I mean dark.
Right. But so in the instance where I was saying that, what was considered dark was a different 4-letter word, which is POOR. And it was, what was told to me was that it was a downer to see poor Americans. What was said to me was, no one likes to see stories about poor Americans. And then we had to dissect there's a difference between being impoverished and poverty. Poverty is an economic status. It's not a lack of culture. It's not a lack of desire. It's not a lack of imagination. It's an economic condition. And I was very, I was like, dark. I'm someone who's trying to make films where a gun never goes off. I'm trying to make films where the woundable body of another person is hugely respected, and that you don't take that lightly. I'm trying to make and I was like, God, dark is sadism. Dark is tyranny. Dark is dystopian. Dark is willfully trying to violate the boundaries and well-being of another person,
Right.
And I was like, gosh, wow, economics and facing U.S. economic reality is what we're the most scared of. You can fix lots of things with a gun. You can shoot it, and it makes a loud noise, and it's definitive, and the bullet lands somewhere. It pierces something. It's definitive. It goes through Kennedy's head. It's definitive. It's there's a German term for the definitiveness of a bullet. But Sam Fuller talks about the bullet of emotion, and that's the one that we're talking about when that word dark is used about someone's life status, about someone's economic conditions. It's the bullet of emotion. We want them to get what they need as viewers. We want them to be helped when they need help. We want them to live the best life that they can. We want them to not suffer, right? Most people want for other people what they want for themselves. I want you not to suffer. And so it's dark when you see someone suffering unnecessarily, or something that could be fixed or rectified, if she could get enough cash, she wouldn't have to give up this small, humble house, right? Which is a lifeline to a whole life and history and family life. There's a lot of if then, right? If the US military could employ her and give her a bonus within a shorter amount of time, could she then make it work? Could she then hold on to this very small house? So dark, someone can be shot multiple times. Someone can be sadistically tortured for entertainment, and that's not considered dark for some reason.
Yeah, that's bizarre, isn't it?
It is bizarre.
Right.
And
yeah.
so really, it was economic darkness that I think the dark was about economic disparity and how you survive, how do you make your life work when you're not given a cushion. And that is one of the tenets of neorealism and social realism. How will I live my life so as not to get weary of my life? How will I not get ground down by the grind or the hustle I perform to make my living, those kinds of things. So yeah, that's that thing, that confusion sometimes we have, where the people trying to survive can't be entertaining. I think it really can be.
Of course.
Yeah. And so it's very easy, and it's a way out to say, oh God, that's dark, that's heavy. Her circumstances are heavy. Dark in that sense is AKA, also known as, that's a downer. No one will want to watch that. So that's why I give credit to someone like Daniel Woodrell, the author, who knew if you put a mystery, Dickens knew this. Dickens, who else do we have to bow down to?
Yeah, really.
Then one of my all-time storytelling heroes, take a number, join the world, join the queue, But the fact is, he knew that you could put the most scrappy survivors of London, its countryside, its northern territories, up north, wherever. And if they had a will, and if they were wily, if they had resources in their head to put together schemes and maps and lend a hand and feel what they feel, he could make you be so excited about every time that little Dorrit, steps outside of the prison, to visit whomever, And so he could make you excited about what it's like to talk to a convict late at night.
Yeah. Dickens, to quote Dickens, he says that there is no light without dark. That's what his writing was about, wasn't it?
Yeah. And so therefore, And so light would be great. I want to do light too, because light is a comedy. But it can be, that's where I would draw on some of my ardor for Ken Loach. Because Angel's Share is my perfect social realist comedy. The film I just did for 10 years, oh gosh, it's called, it's a film about life after incarceration. It's a narrative nonfiction. And it's all about what do you do and how do you rebuild your life after you get out of a stint in prison. But I want to make one. I was so inspired. I've been working on this film, finally finished it. But in the middle of editing, they did 29 Ken Loach films at the Film Forum in New York.
Yeah.
29. I didn't get to see all. I'd seen many of them, but Angel's Share was a revelation. But the fact that I was working on a story that dealt with parole and what it's like to try to find, again, ways to not make your life weary, not to get weary of your existence as you're sober and as you're on probation and as you're doing all of these things. That comedy really that ticked the boxes for me. I was very excited that you could do both.
Right. Searching for Eric.
Yeah, searching for Eric.
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. Yes.
So when's the film you've been working on for 10 years? When are we going to get to see it? Where's it going to be shown?
That film's it's a 5-hour film. Actually, it's in 5 chapters. And so it's very hard to exhibit it. And the where and when is a very persistent and I would say quite upsetting mystery to us.
Oh, really?
Because it's very, very, very hard to find a way for us to share this work. There may be some beautiful, beautiful help from a very wonderful collection here that's just fighting to make the world a better place for cineasts, which is the Criterion Collection.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And there may be a way for them to issue it so that it can be seen and shared for anyone who has ever liked the work that our team does. It's just a small team of us, but this film would be in keeping with the kind of storytelling we do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's longitudinal. So I hope this isn't presumptuous. I think Ken Loach would like this film because the guys have such good humor. Part of surviving, right, is one technique for surviving is an individual's deployment of a certain kind of scrappy humor. And people who've been locked up frequently have it in spades. And it's a very specific kind of camaraderie that people, formerly incarcerated, they call themselves frequently ex-cons, but, formerly incarcerated individuals have a certain kind of bond, just like veterans of war.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of fraternity, I'm a sucker. I don't know. I always thought that was a very gendered response on my part, that as a feminist filmmaker, like my number one attraction is like male fraternity. Like I can never get enough. When dudes are like interesting with each other and funny with each other and good to each other, that's my heaven. That's my heaven. And so these particular individuals, they weren't all men, but this posse, this team, this crew, if you will, of New Yorkers who had been incarcerated, had a lot of that energy between them. And so I was hoping very much to capture the whimsical side of life after prison as well. Whimsical sounds wrong. Okay. The aspirational and ascendant part of life after incarceration. So it's not a downer film, you can see how defensive I am in my social realism. I have to qualify.
That way, yeah. It's light with dark or dark with light. It sounds really interesting, and I hope to see it soon. Yeah. I hope you make your social comedy as well.
Yeah. No, but for you guys, I can send a link because
that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, we'd love that.
You're revered entities who spur on so much of filmmaking culture that people get excited about sharing anything with you. So.
Oh, well, we get excited. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. We really are looking forward to anything you do in the future.
Yeah.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.